This week on Forward.
I think people want to know what it's like day to day. It's like when people say, well, I'll be there when it comes down to it. When what comes down to what? I need you here day in and day out. That's what a marriage is. That's what a relationship is. That's what a friendship is. That's what a partnership is. And that's what love really is. That's how you build something. I mean, failure is hugely interesting, but success is boring. It's wash, rinse, repeat. And that's what I think people want. They just want everyday tools that are going to make their lives like 10 to 15% better. I don't think they necessarily want to hear some great epic story. They can get that by watching Netflix.
It is my pleasure to welcome to the podcast a comedian who's performed on all 7 continents, didn't even know it was possible. You might know him from Amazon or NPR or Netflix or any other place that has funny people. Rajiv Satyal. Welcome, Rajiv.
It is an honor and a pleasure to be with you, Andrew Yang. And NPR, yeah, they have funny people too, when I'm on.
Yeah, you you can break ground everywhere you go. Now, one of the things that's fascinating about your background is that you're genuinely an intellect. You studied engineering. You were a marketing executive at a giant Fortune 500 company. And then you decided to break into comedy, which I'm sure your parents tried to talk you out of. Some of your friends tried to talk you into. But you have a very unusual background for a comic, I would say.
Yeah, I think I went left brain to right brain. I started pre-med, and when that didn't work out, engineering. And then when that didn't work out, I went more into the business side of purchasing and procurement. Then I got a little bit more creative to marketing and agency. And then finally comedy and acting and hosting and all these crazy things now. So, I think you're one of these people too, Andrew, who, you're blessed with just being good at a lot of things. Maybe great at only a couple, but good at a lot. And it makes it hard to choose. You have analysis paralysis.
So blessed, Rajiv. I agree. So many talents, so many choices. So you grew up in Ohio, and as a result, have kind of this everyman clean approach to things, which I appreciate a great deal. You're actually a thinking person's comic. I'd be interested to hear how that process went in terms of your development. I believe you won a Funniest Person in Cincinnati competition early on.
I did. My brother, who is now a fairly prominent queer author, Rajiv Satyal, was like, hey, you should enter this contest. And I said, I'm not a stand-up comic. He goes, no, but you're funny and you're always writing things down. You're not scared of speaking in front of people. And you obviously have a big ego, no humility at all. So go for it. And I entered it and I made the semis. The next year I won it. It was like 64 people or some crazy number. And the reason I went clean is, first of all, I enjoy playing with the English language. I like planting ideas in people's brains without necessarily saying the words. I also, just met these people. I'm in front of 300 people or 50 people or 1,000 or whatever it is. When you meet someone for the first time, you don't just drop a bunch of F-bombs. It always felt very uncomfortable. I don't know these people. They don't really know me.
Speak for yourself, also, Rajiv. I'm constantly like, hey, Andrew fucking Yang, nice to fucking meet you. It's the way I introduce myself.
Hell yeah. You could take that and just be like, shit, yeah. That's as dirty as I go, because I never even used to say shit on stage. But now that, Anderson Cooper said it the other night when Charlamagne the God said, well, CNN had just been focusing on Kamala Harris's color. And Anderson Cooper goes, well, that's bullshit. I go, well, if Anderson Cooper could say bullshit in the middle of the evening on CNN, then I think I could say it on stage.
So check it out. You've got a high paying job. You are Asian, obviously. You're also witty and funny. How the heck does one start making the break to actually being a full-time comic? Because it strikes me that it would be a precarious seeming job at all times. And what is like the big signal that you make? It's like, oh my gosh, I'm actually going to do this for a living now.
I asked a number of comics this and people who had left careers and things like that. And 4 comedians left P&G and we're all successful. We're all still doing it, which is crazy. This happened within the span of a few years, 4 or 5 years. And I remember asking the man who left before I did, Greg Warren, I said, how will I know? And he's headlining comedy clubs all over the world and stuff like that now. And he said it's going to come down to, you're going to have a meeting in one city at one time and a gig in another city at the same time. And for years, you'd been saying, well, of course I'm going to the meeting. That's my job. And one day you're going to get up and say, the hell with it. I'm doing the gig. And It's remarkably similar for a lot of people. They just get this inclination of going, I think I'm going to go for it. On the practical side, because we're Asian, I had put at the time, 20 years ago, $25,000 in the bank to give myself 2 years. I said, okay, I could spend $2,000 a month. Rent was cheaper then. A lot of things were cheaper then. We didn't have UBI. We don't have it yet, Andrew. Where's that? We
I
got to get
noticed
you
that. I
involved.
noticed that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I felt I can survive on that for a couple of years. And that's remarkably similar to a lot of people's story. They go, let me give myself 2 years. You won't know within 2 years, by the way. That's a misnomer. I think you think you'll know in 2, but it's going to take you 3, 4, 5 years to figure it out.
Well, first, I will say, if we had UBI, we'd have a lot of terrible comedians out there the next day.
We already do. Maybe we don't need UBI. If that's the metric, we definitely don't need it.
So did you have that meeting and gig conflict? Did that happen to you?
It did. I remember I had been doing this for a while on the side. So I did it in college a little bit, but not in earnest. And I was in a relationship. And when you're dating somebody, you're all in on that. And I didn't have time to run out to the comedy clubs. And as that relationship started to come to a close, I started getting up on stage. And I think that probably actually drove it to a close. And she was supportive at first, but eventually she's like, is this what you really want to do? And I go, yeah, I think it is. She's like, wow, you're not going to have this job very long. And so, I got to the point where I was turning 30 and I flipped out. And people always say, well, age is just a number. Well, all right. Well, then your weight is just a number. Your blood pressure, those are just numbers. Your credit score is just a number. But again, we're Asian. We love numbers. We know numbers have value, which implies they have meaning. And they mean something. So when you turn 30 and you're losing your mind, I didn't have that feeling at 40 or 20 or 10. But at 30, it's because I wasn't doing what I wanted to do with my life. So that's really one of the big catalysts, was realizing that, wow, life's short, as they say. I mean, I don't think it's that short. I'm Hindu. We're coming back anyway. But for me, I thought, let me go get started on this.
So here's the $1 million question, or maybe $50,000 question, depending. So you moved to Los Angeles. You're an aspiring comic. And here's my understanding of the schedule one would engage in. So you have open mics and various opportunities, but they don't get started until the nighttime. And then you'd hustle around and try and do some things and hope that maybe there's an agent in the audience or whatever the heck. But what does one do during the day?
It's a great question. So this is one of the reasons I work clean, is that you can work during the day too. Because if you're dirty, you work only at night. You're going to work only in comedy clubs. If you're clean, you could work both. You could work comedy clubs clean, and you could work corporations or private gigs or whatever else you want to do during the day, conferences or MC things or whatever. So I will try to book things during the day if I can. The other thing that you do, as soon as I moved here, you pick people up at the airport, because they're like, you're not doing anything. Just come pick me up at LAX, wherever you are. It doesn't matter where you are. If you're at OC or Burbank or Studio City or Santa Monica, it doesn't matter. They want you to come pick them up. So I ended up writing. You spend a lot of your day writing, editing, producing, and I always tell people this. I'm like, look, because I do a talk on happiness and all of this stuff. And one of the things I tell people is make sure you're engaging in your craft in some way, shape, or form. Like, if you're a writer, write. If you're a comedian, you should write jokes or perform jokes or edit jokes or post stuff on social media. Like, if you're not doing that every day, why are you doing this then? Why don't you just go back to a regular job if you're not going to do this? I mean, you have a precious number of hours in a day, and that's what you should go do. So after I got done picking people up at the airport and going to LA Fitness a little bit too much, I was like, all right, you know what? Maybe I should start writing.
So you said something about being Hindu. You seem very enlightened. It feels like, do you remember any of your past lives? Was there like a frustrated comedian or a successful comedian in there?
Wow, it's such a high compliment coming from anyone, but especially you. I mean, I like to think that I'm Gandhi, maybe in a former life. You can see the bald head. We'll have to show your listeners and viewers the picture of me as Gandhi at Halloween a few years ago, because I did all the makeup and the mustache and the glasses and everything else, and I'm on Cameo as Gandhi, so there's that too. I really leaned into this Gandhi thing. I don't know if I was a failed comedian or a successful comedian, but I do. But I was always influenced by people like that, like Gandhi and Lincoln and Twain and all these people who could just use the English language to express their thoughts. And I always thought that it was really super fun. Like, one of my favorite jokes, if you want to call it, Abraham Lincoln wrote this book review, and it read, your manuscript is both good and original, but the parts that are good are not original, and the parts that are original are not very good. I love that.
So how many dirty jokes do you think of where you're like, ooh, this would, because I feel like you should just partner with some dirty comic and be like, look, I've come up with, 100 dirty jokes that I can't use because I'm clean.
Yeah.
Like just take them. Because I will say that I, Andrew Yang, have thought of a multitude of totally inappropriate jokes that
We should partner up. You've gotten up and done some stand up recently, right? So maybe I could write for you. This would be,
oh,
this would be a good
please do,
partnership.
right? Please do write for me. But the question is like, who gets your dirty material and mine if I have any?
My wife in bed. That's who gets it. No, I have not yet doled it out, but I feel like I could. I mean, I'm pretty dirty off stage.
Well, I will say you're an unusually functional comic because most of the comics are totally fucked up. I mean, in your case, you're married,
Well-adjusted.
have a family. Yeah, you're well adjusted. You know,
It's weird, man. Like I came out here to find my dream of comedy, and I've been far more personally successful than professionally. Like we might have talked about this before, but it's bizarre. Like I'm professionally successful. I'll take it. I've done a lot, and that's cool, whatever. But I'm married to this beautiful woman. We have this beautiful child. I have great relationships with my family, and that's just not very funny to people. We're like, well, that's boring. Who wants to hear about that? I'm like, well, that doesn't mean we don't fight. It doesn't mean, but I think that's also what's interesting is like you were talking about like overcoming adversity and for politics and for comedy, because I feel like I'm perpetually running for president. I feel like that should be my container. I just have all these ideas. I don't think that, and it's funny you say the post-inspiration era, people really need that anymore. I don't think it's, oh my God, I overcame this. Even when I give my speeches and stuff, I haven't, people talk about, oh, they lost someone close to them, or this happened, or that happened, or they were locked up in prison, or I don't say that's fine, but that's fine for your story. That's good for you, better you than me. But what I was going to say is that I think people want to know what it's like day to day. It's like when people say, well, I'll be there when it comes down to it. When what comes down to what? I need you here day in and day out. That's what a marriage is. That's what a relationship is. That's what a friendship is. That's what a partnership is. Like, I need you here day in, day out, doing the mundane tasks. And that's what love really is. That's how you build something. I mean, failure is hugely interesting, but success is boring. It's wash, rinse, repeat. And that's what I think people want. They just want everyday tools that are going to make their lives like 10 to 15% better. I don't think they necessarily want to hear some great epic story. They can get that by watching Netflix.
Hello, YouTube. Please do hit that like and subscribe button. And don't forget, you can ask questions at mailbag@andrewyang.com. See you on the interwebs. Okay, so Rajiv, that is one big reason why I wanted to have you on today, is that you've been giving talks about leading a better life, about making yourself happier, presumably maybe someone else happier too. It sounds like, it's like techniques in bed. No, I'm kidding. But I wanted you to share because I think a lot of people right now are somewhat disheartened by what's going on out there. And one of the messages I've had for myself and for others is, look, we should feel good about the things in our own lives that there are to feel good about. We should try and control the things we can control. We should build in our own lives, and that can mean building a relationship, building on a fitness goal, building a business, building a book club, like whatever the heck it is, and invest in those things and be happy. And so you've been giving a very successful talk to different audiences about how they can become happier.
Yeah, and this field is so picked over, just like leadership and relationships or whatever. It's what you bring to the table, right? You put your own spin on it, which is what we were just talking about. And, they say that happiness, there's been some research about it, that it's a few different things. It's your happiness set point. So you're just born to some extent with some kind of set point. And they've proven this with lottery winners over and over. Like how much ever money they win or they spend or they go broke or whatever, they kind of end up at the same happiness that they were before, because that's a really powerful piece of it. And you could be cursed with maybe, you're at 30% instead of 70% or whatever. Then there are, life circumstances, the things that empirically happen to you that will make you better. Yeah, winning the lottery would probably be better than becoming a paraplegic, but they've done studies that people who had a happiness set point higher than people, who became paraplegics, and they were still happier than people who won the lottery. It's crazy, those sorts of studies. So What I can tell you is like improving you maybe 10 to 15%. Stephen King talked about this in his book On Writing, where he said there are 4 kinds of writers. There's bad, competent, good, and great. Bad and great, I can't do anything for you. You're bad, you're bad. You suck. You're probably not even going to pick up this book. You're bad. You're great. You don't need my help. You're Ernest Hemingway. Have fun. Go write and sell a lot of books or become a tortured genius or whatever you want. Because what I can do is I can take you from competent to good. And the word good just has become like, oh, you're good. No, but being a good writer or being a good stand-up comic is hard. So that's what I think I can do is I can offer tips and tricks to people that are like, okay, if you just do a few things, like adjust your attitude a little, do a couple of things that may, like you were saying, like make yourself happier, make someone else happier. There's an old quote that's like, if you can't enjoy yourself, if you can't enjoy yourself, enjoy somebody else. And there is something, maybe it is sexual too, to your point, but there is this idea of like going out to volunteer or like you said, starting a book club or starting something like that or joining something that if you go help other people. I mean, when I lost my dad, people would say, oh, you know what I hate is then people would come tell me their own sob stories. I'm like, I loved that. I felt that I was being helpful then. Somebody said, oh, I just lost someone close to me. Then we could commiserate. And I could say, oh, here's what I've learned. Here's how I could maybe help you. And I didn't feel useless or helpless anymore because you lose your parent. There's nothing you can do. But if you can help other people or put a smile on their face, whether you're on stage or not, I mean, that's pretty cool, man. Like you suddenly feel like, oh, I've got it. I could still like, I'm getting wise from this. And it also stress tests your talk too, because otherwise you could just be full of shit. You're like, well, here are all these things I came up with. But then tragedy strikes and you throw it all out the window. And you're like, well, then your system's bullshit. Like your system's stupid. Like it has to help you when you're down as well as up.
Okay, so it sounds like there's bad at happiness, you're miserable, I can't help you. Then there's great at happiness and you don't need my help. And then a lot of people are happiness competent and you're trying to make them good at happiness. So what are the things that you can do to get someone's happiness up 10 to 15%?
So I have a good friend of mine. Actually, one's a writer, one's a director. They're married. And I asked for some tips from my friends. And I wrote this down, so I'm going to read it to you. But he said, my wife and I offer a toast at dinner every night. Over the years, we learned to toast only what happened today rather than what we hope will happen tomorrow. Doing so makes it a practice of gratitude instead of wish fulfillment. And I loved that. I thought that was great because people often go, well, am I supposed to be ambitious or grateful? And I'm like, well, you can be both. I mean, I treat it like parentheses. In the morning, I wake up, I meditate, I pray. In the middle, I go out and I kick ass and I treat people like stepping stones. And in the night, I pray for forgiveness. I'm kidding. I don't do that. But I think that you can be both. You can be ambitious. You can be grateful, just showing gratitude. And people say that a lot, but I liked that specific one, which is I'm going to thank God or whomever. It doesn't have to be God. You don't have to be religious. But I just want to give thanks to whomever or to the person who made you happier just for that. And I think so many times we're praying and hoping and living in tomorrow. And you keep hearing about living in the power of now and all that stuff. And that's true. But I love that specific practice of just being grateful for what you had today.
So gratitude has been proven to make one happier, and being a very measurable, focused guy, I did what they said to do, which is create a list of things I'm grateful for. So it's a note on my phone. And
I do that same thing every day. That's amazing.
And then I look at it periodically anytime I need to pick me up, and sometimes I add something. Very seldom do I subtract anything from it. When I subtract something from it, it's because the restaurant in question closed, and I'm like, oh, I can't be grateful for that pizza place anymore because it's gone. But the list is helpful. You look at it and you be like, oh yeah, for some reason I forgot that. I had 2 kids, whatever it is.
Like Jerry Seinfeld said, that's why you put the pictures on your desk facing you. It's like, what, do people forget that they have kids? Like, it's 5:00, let's hit the strip club. Oh wait, I can't. I've got kids at home. I've got a family.
Yeah, and the list. I mean, I have a lot to be grateful for. Now I'm the child of immigrants, as you are too, and so like when I was younger, I had this constant metabolization of any achievement. It's like if I achieved something, it made me happy for literally 3 seconds. And I was like, okay, what next? What next? I think it fuels a lot of people that way. Now, for the first time, I'm starting to gain some greater appreciation for some of the things that have gone behind me. And then there are times too where I'm like, come on, Andrew, like there's so much ahead of you. You got to stay fired up. You got to stay angry. And you talk about how you went to the gym too much. Like I definitely went to the gym too much for a period of my 20s. I just had chocolate protein shakes in the apartment and
Yep.
wore
Myoplex.
wore tank tops, just walked around. And coincidentally, felt underemployed at that time, and also had a hard time getting a date. It's like they're all tied together. But the gratitude file certainly works.
And I do it every day. So I write something new every day. So I'm looking at mine. I hadn't even thought, you're right. There is a way of writing everything for which you're grateful and reading it every day. And I'm going to add that to it, I think. I think that's really good for 2025. What I write is, something was like, I'm grateful for a warm inside day. Like it was a little cool in LA, 71 degrees. So we're inside under blankets. And I thought, well, this is a nice cozy day I had with my wife. My mom just moved in with us. I'm grateful for 2 free pizzas. I went to Domino's to pick up pizzas for our daycare. That's what kind of dad I am. That was our potluck. We're getting pizzas, but they said they wanted pizzas from Domino's. I'm like, fine. And it took a little bit longer. So they gave me 2 free pizzas. I was grateful for that. I'm grateful for a very good podcast I just did with somebody. I had a great guest on. I'm grateful for so many of my friends coming when I moved my mom to LA and a lot of people came over. I'm grateful for Skyline Chili. I had Skyline Chili when I was home. So, there were all these things that day in and day out, even if they're small, it's not about that. Like it could be big. It could be, hey, I'm grateful for the relationship I have with my wife or whomever, but I don't think it has to be. It could just be those little things in life. Like, hey, I had an ice cream cone today or whatever. And I was grateful for that. I enjoyed it. And I think that can be another piece of the gratitude journal.
This podcast is sponsored by Helix Sleep. I've been a mattress guy since I can remember because I've always wanted to make sure I didn't develop back problems. I worked out, I still do. Maybe it's a different type of workout. Before I used to be all into heavy weights. Anyway, you know what I mean. I've been sleeping on a Helix Sleep Dawn Firm mattress for years, and it's been exactly what I've wanted. My kids also seek it out as the best mattress in the house, and all of my friends who've bought a Helix Sleep mattress from this podcast advertisement have told me in person, hey, it's exactly what I was looking for. Don't take my word for it. It's also the #1 mattress recommended by Wired and GQ and other people who like to sleep on mattresses and test them out. And right now, you can get 27% off site-wide plus 2 free Dream pillows with any mattress purchase. It's a free bedding bundle with any mattress order that's Luxe or Elite. What does that mean? You'd have to go to Helix's website to check it out. Go to helixsleep.com/yang. With Helix, better sleep starts now. Okay, so gratitude file or document or a note or whatnot is one way I can get myself to being good at happiness. What else?
Okay, what else? So one thing is some of these are mindset shifts. So like hanging in there. What I mean by hanging in there is life operates on a delay system. So you work hard all fall. Like, let's say it's autumn of 2024, and you're working really hard. You're getting no results. You're like, what's going on? I'm banging my head against the wall. I'm doing all this stuff, and I'm not getting anywhere. That may or may not be true. You might just be at like a results plateau, not a work plateau, where you're working hard, but the results won't come until the spring. And I think a lot of us have a tendency to just give up. Whatever it is, working out, working harder at work, working harder on a relationship. And some of those things don't just pay off right away. They're not linear. They can be exponential, or maybe they're on a time delay. And I think it's really important to understand that you may or may not be in a funk, but just give it some time. Like sometimes life, you're like a spring where you're pressed down and you're about to pop up, and people get off the train right before those results were going to start coming in. And I think that's a really, really important thing to remember, that there's a time delay. And I don't think they teach you that in school.
Wow. This is a very interesting principle because there are a couple of different kinds of entrepreneurs I'm familiar with, FYI. Entrepreneur number 1 is I grind, I do the thing, and it doesn't look like it's going anywhere, but I'm just going to keep on grinding until I make it happen, even after everyone else has gone the other, like been like, forget it, man, there's no hope. You'd be like, no, I'm gonna bring this company to life, and then you come back and you're like, wow, they managed to do it. And then there's the other type of entrepreneur that's like, okay, this is not working, so I'm going to cut my losses, move on, and then I'm going to invest in and do this other thing and make this work. I've seen both kinds. I've seen both kinds succeed. And it's tough sometimes to know which situation you're in because, and one of the things I used this at all the time in my 30s and 40s is I did use relationships as metaphors. So same thing in a relationship. Like you're with someone and then you're like, hey, this may or may not be going well. And, then, now in those contexts now, I mean, now that you're married and I'm married and whatnot, you're like, oh, of course you should have just let that thing go. But at the time, you are unsure.
It's really hard. It's actually one of the things that I haven't figured out yet and I posted that on social media maybe a couple of years ago. I'm like, how do you know, like, whether to keep going? Like, is it a message from God or whomever, the universe, whatever, where it's like, dude, keep going. I'm just throwing you challenges. Or it's like, dude, give up. I'm giving you all these signs. It's not going to work. Like, stop banging your head against the wall. And they asked, I think it was Andre Agassi, and I think they've asked Novak Djokovic. I'm a big tennis guy. How long are you going to play? And they ask all these guys these questions. And I loved watching Agassi's press conferences because I thought he was so philosophical and so zen. And, the answer is as long as I feel like I can win the tournament, right? Like as long as I'm still competitive, I get up and I go to Wimbledon and I think I could win it. And the day that you are like, I can't win this tournament, well, that's what it is, right? I mean, I'm a Cincinnati Bengals fan, and we're still mathematically in this thing. Maybe by the time this airs, we won't be. But yeah, until it's, people are like, oh, anything's possible. Well, not anything's possible. You're not going to go to the moon today. Let's be realistic. And, once you're mathematically eliminated, then that's that. That's math. But until you are eliminated, and if you're feeling like you can still do it, I think that's really important because at the Groundlings, Will Ferrell came and we got to ask him questions. And I asked him some question about the differences between stand-up and improv, just to say I talked to Will Ferrell. But somebody actually asked a really good question. And they asked, how often did you measure yourself as you were coming up? And it was a great question and had an even better answer. He goes, anybody can have a bad day. Anybody could have a bad week. Anybody could have a bad month. He goes, when you're in this game, and I think it could apply to acting, improv, stand-up, politics, marketing, engineering, medicine, whatever. He goes, you should not be having a bad 6 months. You should be able to do something now that you could not have done a half year ago. If you're not getting better at your craft after 6 months and you're just in a lull, that's a long time. Now, everything's different. Some things have longer timelines and all that kind of stuff. But that I have found to be extremely helpful, where I tell a joke, where I do something on stage, where I go, oh, I don't think I could have done that show that way 6 months ago, and I've gotten better. And if you feel like you're not getting better, you should probably quit. There was a guy I knew growing up in Cincinnati, and everyone was telling him to stay with it, and I was the only one who told him to quit. I go, you know what? I think you should quit. And it wasn't reverse psychology, and he had won the contest the year I did before, that night or whatever, and he was really funny. And he goes, I want to thank you for being the only person with balls to say that to my face. And I said, look, I've just seen you regress. Like, you have gotten less funny over the months that I've seen you. I don't know what's going on, but you're feeling like you're in a funk, and I think you are in a funk. I don't know what's going on, but I would quit. And he quit. And years later, he told me, he was like, it was absolutely the right decision. So to your point about the post-inspiration era, if you need a demotivational speaker, Andrew, I'm your man. I'll just show up and I'll tell everyone to quit. What an inspiring story.
Dude, during a recession, a law firm brought me in to try and get their associates all to quit. It was really funny.
Really?
Yeah. Because I wrote a book called Smart People Should Build Things, and it was like a kind of a famous corporate, left the firm in 5 months story, and it's like grass is greener. And they literally brought me in and were like, hey, you want to talk to our associates? Because they were trying to get people to leave. And by the way, I mean, I'm glad you told that dude to quit, because you were the only person to do it, because no one ever says quit.
No.
So this is actually one of the things I want to ask you. It's like, let's say you were to line up 50 people that you embarked on the comedian journey with, and you said there were four others at Procter and Gamble, all of whom are doing quite well. But then there are a bunch of others who stopped doing comedy years ago. Like presumably, like if you started with 50 people, how many do you think are still at it?
The funny thing is that people don't seem to quit. They just keep hanging on and hanging on and hanging on because there's just such a low barrier to entry once you're already in. Like it's easy to just keep hitting mics and getting up on shows. And if you are in enough at different clubs, you can kind of keep going. And look, if you're enjoying it, keep going. I'm not
Yeah.
telling people to quit just because they're not making six figures or just because everybody's metrics are different. And I came from Procter and Gamble. I have a degree in engineering. Like I remember I worked at Fiji Water, and my two up bosses said, well, you have a little bit of an entitlement mentality. I go, yeah, I have an entitlement mentality. I'm really smart. I have a degree in engineering. I worked at Procter & Gamble. Why would I not have an entitlement mentality? Of course I do. And so she was like, I've never had anyone admit that they had an entitlement mentality before. An Asian, a fellow Asian, by the way. And so that didn't last. But I think sometimes the people that hang around, it's fine if they're enjoying themselves, but I'd say out of like 50, I mean, only one person is going to be out of the 64 that did the contest. I mean, I think I'm the only one still in it.
Yeah, that stands to reason. One of the most fascinating exercises I've been on in this last number of years, Rajiv, is that there's a marketplace. And when the marketplace likes you and is rewarding you, then it's easy to go on. You know what I mean? You're out there. So the feedback you get as a comic is pretty direct and immediate. It's like, oh, people are laughing. People like my stuff. Oh, I'm actually getting gigs. Oh, more people are showing up. Oh, I mean, the extreme would be like I'm getting TV pilots or contracts or whatever the heck it is. I will actually convey this to you in a particular way. So I'm, something of a public figure. I could get feedback in any given day from social media posts for sure. Like I get asked to speak in various times, and this is something that really pisses me off about myself, FYI. So I'll get like a speaking gig coming in through a representative, and there's like money attached to it. And then I'm looking at it being, and you must have this too, because you get paid speaking gigs all the freaking time. And then when you get a couple, you're like, oh, I'm so hot right now. And then if you don't get any for, like even some arbitrary period of time, you're just like, oh, like, I'm so cold right now.
Right.
And then, as a creative, it's like, look, one has nothing to do with the other. Like I could be doing the best work of my life, and it has nothing to do with whether someone is calling my agent, like holding money.
It's funny you say that because people will probably think we planned this setup and we didn't. That's one of the tips I have. And the other one I was going to go to when you mentioned entrepreneurs and some that keep going and some that cut their losses. And when I applied to business school, one of my essays was about cutting your losses. And I got into business school. I didn't go. I got into Stern, by the way. That's another thing I did. So I got into Stern. I didn't go. And, defining yourself accurately is so important. And I'm going to read this, and people go, oh, doesn't he know his stuff? I'm like, yeah, but we're on a podcast, time on task here, and I want to make sure I get this right. It's dangerous to define yourself only by your successes. As a freelancer, some months are better than others, which is the point you were just making. And we only do the math in good months. That's what's funny. Like, that's what you're driving at here. Like, the month you make $20,000, you're like, oh my God, 12 times 20. I'm going to make $250,000 this year. I'm hot right now, to your point. Nobody does it in the bad months. Nobody goes 12 times 0 is 0. And I had the pleasure of interviewing Seth Godin. You probably know Seth Godin, I'm sure. You run in the same spaces of tech entrepreneur and all these things. And, I asked him how he deals with booms and busts. I'm like, how do you do that? Because it is so up and down. And I had just started doing comedy. And he said it's because it's his definition of what an entrepreneur is. And he says an entrepreneur is someone who has a series of successes and failures. It isn't someone who has only wins. This way, when one of his ideas falls flat and he learns something from it, he's just as much of an entrepreneur as when one of his adventures hits and he makes millions. Ventures, not adventures, I guess both. It gives him the freedom to achieve his potential without fear. Like Thomas Edison said, I haven't failed. I've simply found 10,000 ways that won't work. And I love that. It's all in a question of how he defined himself. He didn't define himself as, oh, I'm a comedian only when I'm funny. I'm a comedian only when people are laughing. No, you're a comedian even if the joke didn't work and people aren't laughing and you got booed off stage. You still have the balls to get up there. You're going to learn something from this. You're going to rewrite the joke. You're going to get better, right? Unless you quit. Unless you have a friend like me who tells you to quit. But I think ultimately that's an important thing to remember is defining yourself accurately. Like they say, sometimes you don't have to do something different. You just have to do what you're doing differently.
This podcast is sponsored by ExpressVPN. How did you choose which internet service provider to use? The sad thing is, most of us didn't have much of a choice because ISPs operate a lot like monopolies in the regions that they serve. They then use this monopoly position to take advantage of customers, and yes, they even sell your data, your activities to advertisers and big tech companies, and you don't see a dime. That's why I protect my internet surfing and devices with ExpressVPN. When you use ExpressVPN, it's like a magic portal to a perfectly safe and anonymous internet. And don't take my word for it. This is the #1 VPN service according to CNET. It's used by major companies all over the world. So stop handing over your personal data to ISPs and other tech companies who then mine your activity and sell off your information. Protect yourself with a VPN I trust to keep my privacy online. Visit expressvpn.com/yang. That's expressvpn.com/yang to get 3 extra months free. Go to expressvpn.com/yang right now to learn more. You know what's funny, Rajiv, is I won an award in 2012 from Fast Company saying one of the 100 most creative people in business. I'd started a nonprofit called Venture for America. And I saw that and it's like, I'm not the least bit creative. Like I saw myself as very much like an executive, very
strategic.
Serious. Yeah, just, numbers guy, et cetera, et cetera. And what's funny is that creativity ended up emerging over time, trying to get the word out about Venture for America at first. And then when I decided to run for president, I thought, well, this will be like starting a nonprofit. And it turns out that it's totally different because when you're starting a nonprofit, it's not your face, it's not your name, it's not your candidacy. What happens when you're a candidate is that people then feel like they're allowed to ask you any question under the sun, to prod you, to poke you, to be like, well, especially in my case, I was running for president. So it literally was like, hey, come on in, like ask me anything.
Right.
I'll do whatever. And I wasn't very good at it for quite some time, honestly. It was 2018, and it turns out no one gives a shit about a presidential candidate until after the midterms of that year. So I had a solid 10 months of being like, hey, guys, running for president. They're like, wait, what? Like, what's a calendar? This doesn't make any sense. And then I got better the more the more creative I was and the more human I was, the more I self-disclosed, the more personal I got. And over time, then the campaign ended up catching fire. But a lot of it was that there were a bunch of people who felt like they knew me. And even in Iowa, when we were testing the message, like we were testing support for universal basic income, and it went from 25% to maybe 57%, which was a big victory. But among the people who were for it, they would not talk about universal basic income's policy impact. They would just say, saw Andrew Yang speak. He seems like, he's a smart guy. And so like, yeah, like, I think it's a good idea now. It was like that. And so the point I'm getting at a little bit is like, I feel like for comedians, there's almost like a need to dig. Like you kind of have to dig into yourself in order to figure out what's funny, but also what you can express in your voice in a way that people find convincing, entertaining. So when you write, how much of it is in that milieu where this is something that I, Rajiv, could deliver? And how much of it is something where, okay, someone else going to deliver it. It's a script. It's not for me.
You've said so many insightful things in that speech, which I would call it a speech. I'm not saying that mockingly. I really think there was a lot in there, and it dovetails very nicely with a conversation I had with somebody I just met a few weeks ago, and we were talking about Hassan Minhaj, and I know you know Hassan as well. And Hassan lived with me for a couple of years here in LA. He was my roommate for a little over 2 years. And when I opened for him in Cincinnati of this year, and then went to dinner with him and Aftab Puraval, you know Aftab as well,
Yeah, Mayor, Mr. Mayor.
Great time. We went to Jeff Ruby's Steakhouse, had a blast. And, one of the things I said about Hassan is versus me, because I talked to my dad. He goes, "Why aren't you as big as Hassan Minhaj?" And when we watched his show, because I was opening for him in front of 3,000 people, and at the end of it, I said to my dad, or maybe it was the next day, I said, "Do you now realize why I'm not Hassan?" And he's such a fan of mine. My dad, rest in peace, he passed away in May of this year. Actually, it was the last night we ever spent together. Was he watched his son, me, open for Hassan in front of 3,000 people in Cincinnati, the town that he loved. And my son was running around on the stage right before and after, not during, fortunately. So it was a great night, very special night. And, I was saying this to the person I just met. I go, I don't believe my act the way that Hassan believes his act. And it was a breakthrough moment where I'm like, I write these jokes, and I feel like I'm the only one who can write those jokes. I feel like they are witty, they're insightful, they're clever. But I said those words out loud, and a lot of people laughed. A lot of people laughed through talking too. A lot of people learn through listening. I learned through listening, but I learned by talking too. And I learned by the things I say out loud. That's what therapy is too, right? And that's, what do they say about theater? Like, good theater is therapeutic for the performer and the audience. Bad theater is therapeutic only for the performer. And so there's this moment where it has to be good. It has to be symbiotic. It has to be a dialogue, not just a monologue. And that was a breakthrough. And I went, I don't believe this. You have to continue to dig. And I've done these solo shows that I deeply believe in and that have resonated with people about my dating life, about music, about politics. And those are the times where I go really deep into what do I believe? What are my thoughts, fears, and dreams and hopes? And, Louis C.K., rest in peace, talked about this. George Carlin talked about this. And,
I talked to Louis C.K. not that long ago. He's with us. No, continue. I'm kidding.
I'm not breaking news here. I'm not breaking news. He is still alive. And you keep, but his career is doing fine, by the way. So you keep digging and digging, and you get, skin deep, and then you go into, your thoughts, and then you go into your feelings, then you go into your beliefs, your core. And I think that is what people resonate with, and what resonates with people, because they say that which is most personal is most general.
Hey all, if you know me, you know I'm not that handy in the kitchen, and I have become a huge believer and booster of Factor. Factor's delicious, ready-to-eat meals make eating a joy. It's so fast. You just pop that thing 2 minutes later, and you are eating a restaurant-quality, healthy meal, making you feel excellent about yourself. My favorite is the turkey chili with zucchini, and there is so much more to choose from. You never get tired of it. It fits any budget. It's fast, healthy. It is going to be the new Factor in your life. Yes, I'm a fan. Head to factormeals.com/yang50 and use code yang50 to get 50% off your first box and 2 free wellness shots per box while subscription is active. That's code yang50 at factormeals.com/yang50 to get 50% off your first box. Get Factor today. It's going to change the way you eat. Okay, so gratitude, lengthen the time frame / hang in there, define yourself accurately, and don't let, in my mind, the marketplace define you, because the market is very seductive. And by the way, it's one of the things that's ruining us, is that at this point, the market's gotten so bizarro, and certain, I feel like being an asshole gets rewarded. It's one reason I really like you, is that you're clearly a good person, thoughtful, clean comedy, etc., and then just making things happen. I mean, like I feel like the incentives are running the wrong way. Anyone who follows me knows that like that's my outlook, is that our incentives are messed up, and because our incentives are messed up, then our outcomes are messed up. I can definitely confirm those as good happiness tools and techniques. Do you have like a magic number of these tools? Is it like Rajiv's magic 11-step program to Nirvana? Did I just name your next book? Did that happen?
I think you might have. You're gonna have to take credit if that's what I go with, and you even use Nirvana, which is my people. I love it. I probably have 20 of these things, and I have 20 things that I go, okay, I haven't heard really anyone else say that in that way before. And then on top of that, then I've got this other thing that I do, which is called the Year of the Hustle, and it's a technique where you can implement these things into your life. And I don't want to overly sell here or anything like that, but there are kind of two components
Feel free, man.
to this.
Feel free.
Okay, I'll find that. I'll overly sell. So, Jerry Seinfeld had this thing where, okay, this computer programmer ran into Jerry Seinfeld and asked, what should I do? Give me some advice. He's an open micer, took some balls to walk up to Jerry Seinfeld just to ask that, but, not his field, still working full time. So what? So Seinfeld rather famously told him, he's like, get a calendar, preferably one where you could see every single day of the year on one page, so you don't have to flip pages. And the key to stand up is writing. So you have to write day in and day out. And he goes, for every day that you write, mark an X. November 27th, 2024, mark an X. And he goes, you'll have a few here and there scattered, and you'll have 2 in a row, and then maybe 3 in a row, and whatever. Because eventually, you'll get a chain going. And psychologically, you're not going to want to break that chain. And your job is don't break the chain. So I took that. And then I took this other thing, which is a lot of people say it takes a month to form a habit, 21 days, 30 days. And there have been studies that say it's actually longer than that or whatever. It's about a month. And, I love gimmicks. And I thought, okay, why don't we combine those? Why don't I come up with like 12 behaviors, 12 things I want to change about myself? Maybe I want to meditate. Maybe I want to drink more water. Maybe I want to read more news. Maybe I want to read a book every day. Whatever all these things are every day that you're going to do. And I said, why don't I start with the one that'll make the most difference? And I started meditating in January of that year, 2013, I think it was. And then in February, I started doing yoga. And you have to keep doing meditation too, because it's not a New Year's. That'd be a new month's resolution, not a New Year's resolution. And so then in March, I added something else. And by December, I had these 12 behaviors that I was doing, and I was doing them day in and day out. And I have a perfect streak of doing these things for I think 9 years, 10 years. I've even lost track of how long it is, but I've been doing these things every single day. And I think that's the only system that's worked for me. I mean, up until then, I would do my New Year's resolution until January 10th, 11th, and I'd fall off the wagon. I'm like, I don't know, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to learn a vocabulary word every day. I don't care. And I started doing the system, and some people have implemented it. And I've seen these calendars at people's homes, and it seems like it's working for people. So I'd have to walk people through. It's a whole workshop and all that kind of jazz. But you can hire me to come in and tell you the rest of these tips and give you the calendar secrets too.
Wow. Does this 12 months of hustle, is that the Year of the Hustle? Is that what that is? That the name?
Yeah. I mean, I didn't come up with the Year of the Hustle, so I want to be careful with that. So I just call it the Art of the Hustle. And the people who made these calendars, there were people who made the calendars. They don't make them anymore. I don't know what happened to them. And I thought I need to make people why aren't you making your own calendars? You
should definitely make a calendar. And then there should be a naked picture of you. No, artful, tasteful, Speedo.
You can peel it off. Like Major League.
Speedo, yeah.
At the end.
At the end, you get the full Rajiv.
The full Monty.
As your reward for developing 12 new habits and techniques. Well, hey, man, you're a walking example that it has worked if you're 9 years in. And now you do these 12 things. Certainly, most everyone could use this. And, this is being recorded in the holiday season, so maybe people will adopt it for 2025. By the way, that's actually super on message because I want people to think about what we can do in our own lives and less, obviously, I'm a political figure and blah, blah, blah. And I still have some macro swings in me. But to me, these things are very much tied together that if you're taking care of yourself, then you're much more able to affect change in the world.
Absolutely. My friend said this to me, one of the comics that left P&G, and he said, you should really try to own this season, like November, December, January. This is your time to get your calendar out there, get your things out there. I mean, people can follow me on Instagram. I'm Funny Indian. And I'll be posting a lot of these clips on happiness. I post a lot of stand-up and a lot of interviews. And Andrew, I think you committed to doing my podcast as well. So I got to get you on there. I would love to have you on there and ask you my set of questions. So flip the script on you and you can be the guest instead of the host. So that'd be a lot of fun.
Well, I think you hit it, Rajiv. If someone does want to download your wisdom, your humor, is it funnyindian.com?
Yeah, funnyindian.com is my website. And then I've got a Substack about happiness. And it's just called gogetgruntled.substack.com. But I think if you just go to gogetgruntled.com, and that will redirect to my Substack.
You're a very smart, wise, funny human. And I love the fact that you think you've kind of done this before, in the sense that, you know what I mean? Like if you have that multi-life perspective, you're like, yeah, slow month at the Comedy Cellar. Like, who cares?
Who cares? We'll be back.
Yeah, I'm in millennia number 2 or whatnot. Please do
You're so full of compliments. I'm going to have to make my wife listen to this to remind her why she married me, because you're smart, you're funny, you're wise. I'm like, my wife doesn't say any of these things. Does your wife say these things to you? What's wrong with my marriage?
No, really. I think our wives are meant to counter whatever else is going on. So if I'm getting good stuff from the world, my wife's like, you're terrible. And then if I'm getting terrible stuff from the world, that should be like, ooh, like, you're not so bad.
Counterbalance. She's a counterbalance. That's like government is supposed to be a counterbalance. I like that. They say behind every successful man is a woman rolling her eyes.
Certainly, there's been some eye rolling in the Yang household over this last number of years, shall we say. But Rajiv, congrats on your work. I think that people could benefit a great deal from your very practical, hard-won knowledge and your humor. If someone wants someone who speaks, MCs, brings down the house, makes corporate teams happier and more functional, Rajiv can do it all. And looking forward to sharing some time with you in the days to come. Who knows? Maybe I'll end up guesting at your next comedy show.
I would love that. I got to write you some dirty material. You can appear on my clean comedy show. I've done your podcast. You're going to come do mine, I believe. We've got a budding friendship. That's what my wife calls you, by the way. How's your new BFF, Andrew Yang?
Yes. You can say he's doing great.